I don't know a lot of farmers, but the farmers that I know would never ever consider, much less go ahead and buy a field that they had never seen before, right? As a farmer, you want to know what the field produced in the last couple of years. Was the farmer a good farmer? Did he take care of the soil? Did he allow things to regenerate and rebuild? How's the layout of the land? What property does it butt up next to? Is it close to some of my property that I already own? So this guy here in verse 18 said, well, he's making an excuse. I can't go. I've got to go look at this field that I've already purchased. Verse 19, I have just bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm on my way to try them out. Now, again, this does not make a whole lot of sense, because if you're buying 5 yoke of oxen, you are buying at least 10 oxen. This is not a small exchange of money, right? So you're not going to buy an animal that's going to help sustain your family without having checked this out, right? Excuses. Verse 20, another said, I just got married, so I can't come. Well, no excuse needed there. Verse 21, the servant came back and reported to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and ordered his servant, go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring in the poor and the crippled and the blind and the lame. Sir, the servant said, what you've ordered has already been done, but there is still room. The master then told his servant, go out to the roads and the country lanes and make them come so that my house will be full. This story is, Jesus is telling the story, drawing a straight line to God. Why does the man throw a banquet? Well, maybe this is just how the man is. Maybe this is just the nature of the man. That he throws a banquet and he wants people to come and participate and enjoy the banquet. There's another good illustration of this. If you flip back to Luke chapter 19, just a couple chapters further back, we find a familiar story. In the first handful of verses, first 10 verses there of that chapter, we find the story of Zacchaeus. Jesus is walking along the road, and Zacchaeus is the short Jewish tax collector. And he wants to get a glimpse of Jesus, but he can't see, so he climbs the tree. Jesus walks along and finds Zacchaeus hanging out in the branches. And Jesus says what to him? We're going to have dinner. Why is it that Jesus would want to have dinner with this guy who has made a living stealing from his own countrymen? Because that is exactly what the tax collectors did. And the Roman government used Jewish men primarily to collect taxes because they knew they would have a greater influence and greater conversation. They would be neighbors with some of these people they wanted to collect taxes from. And the Roman government said, anything that you make over and above the tax, that's yours to keep. Tax collectors were seen as very shrewd and basically thieves. They were not considered much greater than thieves. And so what happens here, Jesus says to Zacchaeus, I'm going to come and have dinner with you. Why is it that Jesus wants to have dinner with someone like Bernie Madoff? Because that is essentially who this guy is, right? He has made a living stealing from people from his own ethnic background, his own country. Maybe that's just the way that Jesus is. That Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is yours. Those who don't deserve it, those who are on the outs, those who don't recognize the need for God. And sometimes we get so caught in asking the question of why that we miss part of what is really happening. In August of 1974, there was a Frenchman by the name of Philippe Petit. And Philippe Petit was a kind of an acrobat, kind of a circus performer type of man. And he decided in August, I think it was August 7th, 1974, that he was going to walk on a tightrope between the Twin Towers in New York City. And that's exactly what he did. They went up and shot a cable across and tied them off on both ends at the top of the Twin Towers. And he spent about 45 minutes walking the tightrope, 160-some stories above the street below. And a large crowd gathered, and he walked back and forth. He would lay down on the rope. As the police would come up to the top of the Twin Towers, they had police on both Twin Towers. And he would walk up close enough so they could almost reach him and then turn around and walk back. He kind of taunted them and teased them a little bit. And eventually, after 45 minutes or so, he comes off of the Twin Towers. They take him into custody immediately. And they bring him down and out the doors of one of the Twin Towers. And by now, there's all kinds of news crews and a huge crowd has gathered. And one of the questions that the news crew asks him is why? Why did you do it? And Philippe says there is no why. There is no why. I wanted to do it. I did it simply because of the enjoyment of walking the tightrope between these two massive structures. And then he goes on to say, as he's continually pressed, why did you do it? He says, this is such an American question. Why? Why? There is no why. Maybe this is a small reflection of who Jesus is. That Jesus does not always answer the question of why very well, because maybe it's just his nature to throw a banquet and invite anybody that wants to come. Maybe it's simply his nature to reach out to those that are poor in spirit. There is no why. It's simply his nature. Why does Jesus make an announcement to such a people, the morally bankrupt, the empty, depraved, spiritual zeros, those at the end of their rope? Maybe it's just because Jesus is like that. And the pushback that often happens in this kind of conversation, especially from folks like us who have been around church a long time, is, wait, whoa, hold on. No. The blessing of God is for those who deserve it. Those who say the right things, who give to their church, make the right choices, are morally upright, who say the right things and do the right things, those that work hard and keep their noses clean. That's whose side God is on. That is the pushback that comes sometimes from us. If that is what we say, if that is our response to this proclamation, this announcement that Jesus is making, maybe it is because we are rich in spirit and Jesus isn't announcing anything to us. Now that is hard to swallow. But I think this is a faithful interpretation of what Jesus is actually talking about here. Because God's blessing isn't for those who can earn it. Because the gospel of Jesus, that is the good news, is for those in our broken, morally ambiguous, God-hating, and confused state that many of us pass through at one time or another in our lives. The announcement is you do not have to have everything in place for God to be on your side. God is on your side before you even recognize it. So let me ask you a question, a church question. Are we, as a church, how would I write this? Are we, as a church, do we take the gospel of Jesus and his announcement seriously? Because Jesus' announcement is, blessed are the poor in spirit, those who don't deserve it. Do we take that seriously? Or are we so pressed and determined to keep things the way they are, to maintain the status quo, that we're missing Jesus in his very own teaching? And again, this becomes very hard to swallow because this is a question about us. Are we missing Jesus in his very own teaching? That we are, in fact, rich in spirit. See, Jesus doesn't start way up high on the ladder. He doesn't start up here saying, hey, here I am, come get me. I'm all the way up here. There's all this stuff that you got to do, but I need you to come get me. Jesus doesn't do this. He starts way down low on one of the first rungs of the ladder and says, blessed are the poor in spirit, those who don't know they need God, who don't want to have anything to do with God right now. Blessed are they because God is on their side. The kingdom of heaven is for those who don't deserve the kingdom of heaven. This is a counterintuitive announcement that says, very simply, those who have had abortions, God is on your side. Those who have been unfaithful to a spouse, God is on your side. Those who have messed it up repeatedly, God is on your side. If we cracked open your computer and saw all of the websites that you visit, God is on your side. Because Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Those who do not recognize where they need God, God is with them. And if our response to this announcement is, oh, no, you've got to do some stuff before God is on your side. You've got to maintain certain things. You've got to be in certain places. Then maybe it is because we are rich in spirit and Jesus isn't announcing anything to us. There is a story, a movie called A History of Violence. And at the center point of this movie is a man named Tom. And Tom lives in a small town like Ithaca or Breckenridge. He owns a diner. Everybody seems to love Tom. And he has a couple kids and a wife. And he's just an enjoyable person to be around. Everybody loves Tom. And one day in walks a man who says he is from Tom's past. And he talks about Tom in a light that people go, that's not the Tom I know. He talks about Tom as a murdering, villain, essentially, with a history of violence. And the people in the town and his own wife and kids go, this isn't the husband I know, this is not my dad. People that work for Tom at the diner say, this is not the guy I know, because Tom was very generous in giving back to the community, the people that worked for him in his diner. And there is this discomfort between what we think